And we are back with our second of three amazing conversations today as part of our inaugural Empower-thon. I am so excited that Jen Lebo, the girl mom and director of community life at Fountain Valley School outside of the Springs in Colorado, is with us again. Thank you, Jen.
Yay! Thanks for having me. I love hanging out with you.
And I love having professionals like you. For anybody who's watching, if I'm glancing over here, it's because we are streaming live into our Facebook group, to our LinkedIn page, and to YouTube. But if you have any questions, ask them through our Facebook group. If you're not there yet, come and join us. You can find us very simply, Parent Tween Connection, and I will be monitoring it as we go. But Empower-thon is our inaugural fundraiser for Parent Tween Foundation. And Jen, I know this is near and dear to your heart. I know at one point you said to me that you loved that at Parent Tween Connection, we're kind of like the one-stop shop to find all the people who can help families. Yes. And it was all well and good to say, hey, here, you can find the help that you need. But the Parent Tween Foundation, we have as our mission to help bridge that financial gap that so often exists between families and the resources that can help them. So Jen and all of our other speakers for Empower-thon are coming to join us in the hopes that they're going to give you some fabulous information as you watch, and you're going to say, hey, you know what, that was worth $5, $10, $25, and you'll make a donation to the foundation to help us get up and running. So Jen Lebo, the Girl Mom Coach, thank you again for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. Anything for you. And I love what you do in this group. And I say that as a coach and as a mom.
Well, so let's chat for just a couple of minutes. You know teenage girls better than probably anyone I know, because you've spent how many years working with them?
I think I am at year 25 of living in a dorm, a high school dorm with teenagers. Now, not all of those were with teenage girls, but the far majority, maybe 20 of those 25 years.
Okay, so you know teenage girls.
Yes, although
you
I do
have one of your own.
Yes, one of my own teenage girls, two of my own teenage boys, and I should probably warn everyone that I might get up in the middle of this because my teenage dog might get up and open the door, right? So
because having human teenagers wasn't enough.
Yes, and we both know that could happen.
It's all good. So, Jen, I know one of the things that you and I talk a ton about is connection. And it's in the name of my business and in the organization that we're supporting here. But I know you talk a lot about ways that we can build those connections with others. So you said you had 5 simple skills that every mom, and I'm going to assume dad or aunt or uncle or adult.
Yes. Any trusted adult
can use to better connect with the teen or tween in their lives.
Yes. So again, teen daughter, teen son, across the board with gender here.
Teen human. Maybe it's a little bit different for the teen dog.
Yes. And I do think that I tend to use she, her pronouns when I'm having conversations because I'm talking to moms about daughters and I live with so many girls. But so if I use those, but I mean everyone, right? So I'll try to be all inclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first skills that you say that we need to pay attention to is being aware of our own blind spots.
Yes. This is hands down the first skill that I would suggest to tackle to build connection. What I mean by that is if we don't know our stories, like we've heard the saying, right? Those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it, right? That's what I'm talking about here with our own stories. We all come to the parenting journey with our own blind spots from maybe when we were teens or the journey we went on with our own parents.
Sure.
And if we aren't aware, we don't take the time to recognize, and I'm not just talking about trauma here. I'm just talking about simple beliefs we've picked up from being human in the world. The more aware we are of the beliefs that we have and the stories that we have, the more aware we can become of those, the more we can tell when we're projecting them onto our children, right? So we're not, some of those stories we truly want to be sharing, empowering stories, empowering beliefs, but blind spots could deter us from building that sort of connection when we're just projecting the next story to the next generation.
Can you give me an example of a blind spot?
Yes, I can. And I can give you a somewhat personal one that I grew up with. And maybe many of us in our generation, forgive me with my teen dog, that girls are secondary, right? Or girls are meant to be in a supporting role. I told you he was going to do that. I'll close that in a minute. But that's a blind spot that I have carried, that I lived through as a teen girl. And I'm very aware of that story, and don't want to project that onto my own children now, as I have 2 sons and a daughter. It's very important to me that I'm raising my daughter as an equal to my boys. And that's one of the blind spots I have coming into my parenting journey.
Well, and it strikes me that that's important not only for her and her own self-esteem and confidence and self-efficacy and sense of identity and whatnot, but it's also important for your boys not to get the message that their sister is somehow secondary to them. And then
100%.
that's, granted, right here in this conversation, we're speaking about it in a duality, right? But then when we bring in any other conversations around gender or non-binary, it obviously it expands, but period, the moral here, the message is that none of them is secondary.
Absolutely. Yes. I do not want to project onto my sons that they are all that matter in this house or in the world. And I do, like, it's a gender conversation for me. So perhaps the conversation of gender itself could be a blind spot for me. So I'm very aware of that and very intentional in building safety in all genders in our home, period.
So it strikes me that in order to know them, we have to acknowledge that they could possibly exist.
Yes.
Right. But then what if you don't know what they are? How do you find them?
Well, I'm a sucker for a good journal prompt. So there's some self-coaching, right? I would definitely recommend self-coaching. And I have journal prompts, freebies that I give clients or women in my own Facebook group, and they are geared toward, and again, here I am talking about moms, and they are sort of geared toward moms, but self-reflective. Therapy is a great idea. Conversations with other parents is a great way to recognize your blind spots. But simply looking back at your childhood and asking yourself some questions, or telling yourself, like writing out your childhood, will probably reveal some blind spots.
Awesome. All right. So then the second thing that you said we have to pay attention to, or the second skill after recognizing that we have and identifying what are our blind spots, the second is to know your end game. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I definitely watch Marvel too much. So I love the term endgame, but it works, right? So the first thing we want to do is look back at our stories. And the second thing we want to do is look all the way forward at our endgame. What is our endgame? What results do you want when you're thinking about parenting your kids? Because the answer to that question will drive all of the actions you take moving toward there. What results do you want when it comes to your kids? Because there are a lot of results, and looking at different parents, we all may have different end games. I have very different end games, and at a very different end game than I think my mother did. Maybe my mother-in-law did. Maybe the other moms in my space. So anytime I'm showing up with my kids, or we have conflict, or we have discussion, or there's something comes up where my kids need me, that question will always come up for me. What's the end game? What result am I going for here?
And so what I'm thinking, I'm understanding is you're saying, if you think of the end game, i.e., I still want to be the person that my kids come to when they get in trouble. Right.
That's one end game.
As an example, right? Yes. Then that if we're in a situation where your kid just got in trouble and you are mad as all get out, if you can pause and go, okay, what's my end game? Like, yes, clearly there's a situation to deal with now, but how I behave now or how I engage with them now is going to have an impact as to whether they decide to come to me down the road. And so I'm understanding that you're saying it informs how you engage now when you think,
Yes,
when you keep the end game.
100%. And that is a perfect example. I think we'll talk about that in a minute. Another great example of that is when it comes to school. And again, I tend to think about our teen girls, but I do think this goes across the board. Is your end game as a parent your child's grades, or is it your child's confidence? Because sometimes that could mean you show up differently now, right? If you're trying to teach your child to have more of a growth mindset, you might not be pushing the grades.
Absolutely.
You might be pushing healthy risk taking in the classroom, making mistakes, going after things that scare you at the risk of grades versus stay safe, get the good grades, don't try anything out of your comfort zone. Those could be very different end games.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's something that I've seen come up in my 25 years working with teenagers in the college bound side of things. Is so many of them are hung up on GPA and class ranking, and understandably, like, those are things that colleges evaluate, but they lose that that growth opportunity mindset, and they fall into more, as Dr. Carol Dweck calls it, of a fixed mindset, right? And they're afraid to try things. And I think one of the best things that a parent can do in that arena is be like, hey, you know what? You're going to go to the school that's perfectly fine for you, regardless of what your GPA is. Like, not that I'm encouraging you to like just fail all your classes, clearly, but like, if you get a B, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to destroy your GPA. And like, being valedictorian isn't what I would personally put as an end game. You know?
Yes. And I do appreciate that what their world is often telling them could fly in the face of what we want for them.
Sure.
And that's why that question always has to come up.
Well, and I mean, that's true in so many arenas in their world, right? Not just education.
Yes. What is your end game?
Yeah, I like it. So pay attention to your blind spots, look for them and know what they are, know your end game. Talk to me about building safety. You said that's the third skill we need to pay attention to.
Right. And so if I could suggest any end game that would always be the ultimate end game, it's to build safety where you're concerned. In other words, become your child's safe space. Now, and we alluded to that a little while ago. I'm not saying here to get rid of all the rules or to not have consequences or to be a pushover. In some ways, having rules in place and having consequences creates safety. When you build safety, or when you build consequences, rules, and structure around your child, you are building safety. But it also means perhaps pulling back on the judgment or the fear that your child feels safer coming to you. If that is your end game, that's going to change a lot of how you show up now, as you were saying.
Well, and the thought that came to my mind when you were talking about like building structure and rules and consequences and whatnot establishes safety. Think about a little kid. Like, there's a reason that we have fences on yards, right? If we have neighbors or we're near a busy street or something, we have fences and we put locks on the gates, because when the kids are little, they need to not go outside the yard because there's danger out there, right? So like, clearly that's creating structural physical safety. But what you're talking about as well is more of that emotional safety where they're still going to feel comfortable coming to you.
Yes. One of the examples I think of, and I think a lot of parents, I posted this a few weeks ago, maybe in my Facebook group, and I had a lot of moms comment like, I do that same thing, or I've done that. When our teenagers are out testing their independence, being in social spaces, learning how to make their own choices, and they find themselves in situations where there are opportunities for them to make poor choices, and they don't want to make the poor choice. They want to make the right choice, but they're afraid. We often, as parents, can put things in place where they can reach out to us secretively through text and
Love
there's
it.
no judgment,
Yeah.
right? So, and then we become the heavy. We are safe. They don't create tension with their friends.
Yeah.
And their friends, I always tell my kids, I'm okay if your friends are mad at me if it keeps you safe. Let me close that door because now kids are home.
Yeah. Well, and it lets them save face a little bit, right? They don't want to
Yes.
be the ones that are the goody two shoes who say no to whatever poor choice that they really do want to say no to. But,
Yes.
you
It,
know, that's an idea that, golly, I wish I'd had a couple of times when I was a kid, you know, of
yes.
just a way to be like, I'm safe, but I need you to come get me, for example. Or if they're
Right.
out and about, I've seen it actually go both ways. So like if a kiddo isn't driving or isn't able to drive or whatnot, they could, you know, send a, you know, XYZ, like whatever code, you know,
Exactly.
word back to mom and dad, and then all of mom or dad, and then mom or dad send a text message, hey, we need you home. There's been an emergency,
Yes.
right?
The
So
piece of
that's
that creates the most safety is that the kid knows in that moment, no questions
right,
asked, no
right.
judgment. We'll have the conversation later.
Mhm.
Again, doesn't mean no consequences. It means
Right.
I've got you in the moment. And I know in this example, I do feel like so many of us parents in this day and age,
Mhm.
we sit in that space of like, yes, that that's how I think a lot of parents, especially a lot of the parents in your Facebook group that I
Yes.
see, right? Like this is what this
100%, yeah.
is preaching to the choir, so to speak.
Right.
But
Well, but it's good because it's something that it's a tangible, actionable way that a parent can say to a kiddo, "Look, it's not a matter of if. I know it's a matter of when. Like you're
mhm,
going to find yourself in a situation that you're not really sure how to get out of, and I want to give you that like Monopoly get out of jail card idea of like I want us to have a plan of how to help you get out of that situation because at the end of the day, my end game is that you're alive. Number one, nothing else matters if you're not safe,
yes,
right? Like so that is paramount and being clear that that's the bar. But like if you're in an unsafe environment, you call, you ask for help, and you let me give you a way that you can save face in front of your friends because I fully acknowledge you got to go back to school in front of them tomorrow.
yes, yes. And in order to keep them safe, my belief is that they have to have a consistent and common safe space.
Absolutely.
I,
Absolutely.
full transparency, this is my end game.
Yeah.
I have not crossed this finish line, right? So, and in
Right.
with some of my kids, I'm just getting started. So,
Mhm.
we make mistakes here, but I think
Sure.
we'll get to that.
Talk to me about learning to listen. How does this play in from your perspective?
Yep. This one feels difficult as a parent because I think, for the most part, we know better. Like we've been there, we're on the other side, we've made it through our teens and our 20s. Our frontal lobe is fully developed, and we can look back with hindsight and say, oh no, those were really poor choices. Let me help you not make those choices. But
Mhm.
this is their journey. So the temptation, I think, for most of us parents, common sense wise, is to want to show our kids verbally how to do it and how not to do it.
Mhm.
Um, the the more effective way to connect is to listen, to show up into the space when they're ready. I don't know about anyone else's teens, but mine aren't always like excited to
Mhm.
talk about their lives. So when they do show up and they offer me their problems, their day, their excited news, um, my intention, my end game is safety, my end game is connection. So my action is to listen 10 times more than I talk. Again, this is the
Mhm.
plan. And
Mhm.
one of the takeaways, like one of the important things to remember about this list is that they're called the 5 simple skills. They're not called the 5 easy skills.
Easy skills, right?
Very different things, right? This is hard work and it takes a lot of practice. But
Mhm.
what I mean by listening is asking curious questions, not suspicious questions, but
Mhm.
curious questions from a place of wanting to understand. biting your tongue, right? Often, and just being present, putting the phone down, being face to face, letting them talk, and definitely skipping the judgment, but perhaps also skipping the lecture. This one's hard, at least for me.
Well, in How to Win Friends and Influence People by Norman Vincent Peale, in that book, he references you have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. Use them proportionally.
Yes.
And
there's a reason.
So yeah, absolutely. So neutral. I guess I was going to say, if you know how to drive a manual transmission, you know what neutral is. But I suppose if you drive an automatic, you do as well. There is a neutral space. But what do you mean in these connections?
Yep.
What's your take on staying in neutral?
Yep. Hands down, I think this is the hardest one. And I just said that, I'm saying that just having talked about listening. So this one's hardest for me. And I think many of us parents, but especially, there's a phrase out there called mama bear, right? Like, we wear that phrase with pride a lot of times because we show up for our kids with our emotions. And what I mean by staying in neutral is removing all of your emotions, keeping yourself in neutral. So you're not in a negative space of judgment. You're also not in a forward motion of bringing your emotions onto their emotions. So if your child is coming to you with pain, heartbreak, sorrow, you leave your emotions in check and you are completely objective and neutral in showing up for them. Now, this feels hard, and it almost feels, I think it could be tempting to think, well, that's not showing love. That's being like dismissive and aloof. I almost feel like it's the opposite, because what I have discovered, or what I've learned in being a parent, but also like the more time I spend in the dorm and the more time I spend working with teens in general, when we bring our emotions into their struggles, stories, celebrations, anything, it becomes less about them and more about us. And then on top of whatever they're sharing with us, good or bad, they now have to carry the burden of our emotions. So if you think about that with a worry, I am often tempted to worry then, because it shows love that's one of my blind spots. Worry equals love. And my children then have to worry for me rather than finding solutions to their own issues.
I like the way that you put that, because if you think about like a container that you were to put something in, right? It's not an amorphous container. It doesn't just change shape and spontaneously combust or melt into liquid, right? It's a solid, sturdy container. And so, especially as they navigate into those teen years, when things really start getting intense academically and socially and athletically, if they're committed to a sport at that point, or artistically or whatnot, they need the adults around them to be more of those really structured, somewhat malleable boxes. I'm not saying like cold hard cement, but like, there could be a rug on the bottom to make it comfortable, but still a clear structure around them.
Yep. Yeah. I think if our children if we teach our children by not being neutral, if we teach our children that they have to worry about our emotions, we stop being safe, right? It always comes back to the end game, which in my opinion or my experience is about being safe. So how we show up for our kids leads to how safe we are. And this is one of the ways that we stay safe.
So does that connect over to your mantra? You said this is kind of like step number 6 of, or like an intention of become trustworthy.
Yep. 100%. And again, ask me how I know this stuff first and foremost. Like, these are my blind spots, right? So if you want a child you can trust, you must become a parent they can trust first. So, right? Trust is everything. It's connection, it's safety. We have to be able to trust that our kids are going to be safe when they're out there. They're going to make good choices when they're out there, but they're also going to come to us when they need us, right? There's so much trust that shifts when our kids become teens. It looks different than look both ways before you cross the street. And I need to trust that you can do that. And in order for all of that to happen, in order for us to be able to trust our kids, we must become trustworthy parents. This is one of the greatest blind spots that I grew up with. Children are to I need to be able to trust you. I need to be able to trust you. So now as a parent, I've shifted that and swapped that. And with all the girls in my dorm, with the girls in my girls leadership club, in every interaction, and basically in my new role, but like everywhere in the community, these rules really work for humans. Right? I need to listen more than I'm talking. If I want to be able to trust someone, I have to prove myself trustworthy. Right? My end game should always be, am I creating a safe space for the people in my community? So yeah, am I trustworthy to my kids? Not a pushover, trustworthy.
Well, and it's interesting to me that I think that was a big piece that I was missing, right? That I didn't always trust that my mom was going to have my back. And yeah, it was a challenge. I think that's a big piece of why I didn't reach out to her a lot more when I was younger, you know?
Yes, 100%. And I grew up with the message, I couldn't be trusted as a child. Girls can't be trusted. Girls can't be trusted. That's probably the end game of my life, is to empower our teen girls to know that they are worthy and trustworthy, and that we as adults need to be the first line of trust and safety for them.
Absolutely. Well, and it seems like the become trustworthy could have also been the subtitle, right? It's not just 5 ways to connect with your teen or tween. It's, skills to become trustworthy. And I love the fact that you pointed out that this applies in any environment, whether it's, colleagues, or whether it's a partnership, a spousal partnership, a business partnership.
Yourself.
Yeah, right.
Yourself.
Well, and I think the other point that I think is important to recognize, going back to blind spots, is when you recognize them, like, don't beat yourself up for them.
Yes.
Recognize that they're there and that maybe like they served a purpose. For all you know, it's something that you took on that was a blind spot of your own parents, right? That got passed on. But if we acknowledge it, like it, we can pause it. We can change our thoughts about it.
Yep. And I think as I was thinking about, what are the takeaways, if I could sort of implant any thoughts to anyone listening to this, that's one of those things. Like, if you're here and you're listening to this, you're winning, right? So often we heap judgment onto ourselves as parents, particularly when we're raising teens, because I do believe the teen years are the most fun. And I think we need to change that stigma around our teens, but it's not easy. It's scary and it's worrisome. However, we're doing great work, parents. And if we're here, that means something. And at the end of the day, there's always something to find that's a win. We need to keep, as parents, looking for the wins, not where we went wrong, but where we keep going right, so that we keep showing up. Don't quit. Don't quit. Don't quit.
Nope. All right. So be aware of your blind spots. Know your end game. Build safety. Build the structure in there. Learn to listen and stay neutral.
I wish it was a fun anagram, but it's not.
Well,
I've tried, but at the end of the day, those are the words, and I can't change them to make them cute and fun. Those are the words: blind spots, end game, safety, listen, neutral.
I love it. And again, it applies to dads. with any gender child, partners, businesses, you name it, we've got it. So Jen, thank you. I appreciate you. I'm proud to have you on our Trusted Expert Network. I did neglect to mention that at the beginning. For anyone listening, all of our trusted experts are background checked and reference checked and come highly recommended by clients. So Jen, thank you for being in the Trusted Expert Network, and also thank you for your time for the foundation and for the fundraiser. If you're listening and you got some good information out of that, if you would say thank you to Jen with a kind donation to Parent Tween Foundation. And we have a little bit of a contest going on with amongst our speakers, where if they end up being our biggest fundraiser, then we will take 20% of their donations and donate it to a nonprofit of their choice. And Jen, I can't remember which one yours was.
I don't remember that we talked about it or that I shared with you.
Do you have one you love?
Yeah, I think I would have to say CASA. Is near and dear to my heart, and I love what they're doing, particularly down here in Colorado Springs. But can
you tell us a little bit about them? I forget what the full acronym stands for.
I do too, off the top of my head. But basically, they help families, particularly kids who are in homes that are in the whether it's domestic abuse or separation or foster care, kids who need trusted adults in their lives, because the trusted adults in their lives are not showing up that way. And it creates resources for them that way.
Awesome.
It's really something else.
Cool. So, well, the fundraiser goes from Mother's Day, which was yesterday, all the way through to June 18th, which is Father's Day here in the US. And I do specify in the US because we actually have speakers from England, Portugal, Canada, Australia, and Thailand joining us. So for any folks from those parts of the world, that's why we chose those dates. They ran Mother's Day to Father's Day. It was actually Jen Lebo's idea to do that. So thank you for that idea, Jen.
Yay. So here's a question.
What do you got?
I was actually thinking of this yesterday as I was enjoying Mother's Day, and I'm thinking, do all the is this an international, a global holiday? How lame that I don't know that. And is Father's Day?
It is not Mother's Day in England, for example. So that's why I did need to clarify.
Please let there be a Mother's Day somewhere or in the calendar.
There is. It's just a different date.
And like in Australia, mom in the world.
Yes. But
and
like Father's Day in Australia is in like September or something. And I was like, we're not doing this all the way until September. But I mentioned that because anyone who's listening, this is the links are gonna be live until the end of Father's Day, June 18th. So any donations you choose to offer until then will go to this inaugural Empower-thon. So thank you everyone listening, and thank you, Jen Lebo. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you so much. I love what you're doing. I'm your biggest fan.
Thank you.